first, I don't know I'm going to be tall because my mother is 5'2", my father is 6'2". It'll be me and Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson against the three Samoans.
Before the world ever called him a legend, before the chants, the lights, and the myths, people saw the size first. They always did, stared a second too long, and most of them never looked past that. But what happens when the crowd goes home? When the ring is empty, the cameras stop rolling, and the giant is left alone with his thoughts. André the Giant could fill an arena with a single step, yet some nights, silence felt heavier than any opponent he ever faced. His life looked unreal from the outside. Championships, movie roles, sold-out shows across the globe. But behind that towering image were long roads, aching bones, quiet regrets, and relationships that shaped him far more than any title belt ever could. This isn't just the story of wrestling's biggest attraction. It's the story of a child who grew too fast, a man who carried too much, and a heart that wanted what fame could never give. Normal moments in a world that was never built for him. And once you see that side of André, you can never see the legend the same way again. When people talk about André, they usually start with numbers: his height, his weight, how much he could drink, how much money he made, how many men it took to move him. But numbers don't explain a life. They don't explain what it feels like to walk into every room already being judged, already being mythologized, already being misunderstood. Long before the nickname the Giant became inseparable from his name, André was just a child growing up in rural France, quiet, observant, and very aware that he was different. André René Roussimoff was born on May 19, 1946, in a small farming community in France. His parents were immigrants, working class, and deeply traditional. His father, Boris, came from Bulgaria. His mother, Marianne, was Polish. They raised their children Catholic with structure, discipline, and the expectation that everyone pulled their weight. It was a normal childhood in many ways, except for one detail that quickly became impossible to ignore. At birth, André weighed around 13 pounds. That alone was enough to make nurses pause. As he grew older, the gap between him and other children widened fast. André was already towering over classmates. His hands were unusually large. His growth never seemed to slow down. And while some people treated it like a curiosity, André felt the weight of it early. Standing out is not the same as being special. Sometimes it just means you don't blend in anywhere. His childhood nickname was Dédé, a soft, affectionate name that matched his personality more than his appearance ever did. Despite his size, people who knew him as a boy often described him as gentle and polite. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't try to dominate rooms. He simply existed inside a body that drew attention whether he wanted it or not. And that attention followed him everywhere. In later interviews, his mother was only around 5'2". His father was tall, about 6'2", but not extraordinary. Then came the story that always made people stop mid-sentence. André's father once told him that his grandfather stood nearly 7'8". That detail hung over his life like an explanation and a warning at the same time. By age 12, André was already around 6'3". For most kids, that kind of growth might sound exciting. For André, it meant doors that didn't fit, desks that broke, shoes that had to be specially made, and the constant feeling of being out of scale with the world around him. School never felt like a place designed for someone like him. Academically, he wasn't struggling. In fact, he was particularly good at mathematics. By the time he was 14, André made a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He left school and went to work, not because he was failing, not because he was reckless, but because he believed he already knew enough to earn a living. In France at the time, this wasn't considered rebellion. It was practical. Education beyond that age wasn't mandatory, especially for families who needed labor. André began working on his father's farm in Moulins, doing hard, physical labor day after day. For the first time, his size felt useful instead of awkward. Years later, his brother Jacques said André could do the work of 3 men. He never complained or showed off, finding purpose in routine and effort. But farm life wasn't his final stop. André tried other paths, apprenticing in woodworking and later working in a factory that built agricultural engines. These were solid, respectable jobs, yet none of them felt permanent. It was as if he was waiting for something bigger, something that could finally match his strength, endurance, and untapped potential. One detail from this period of his life still surprises people because it feels almost unreal. During the 1950s, while André was growing up, The Irish playwright Samuel Beckett lived nearby. Beckett occasionally drove local children to school, including André and his siblings. Imagine that image for a moment. A future literary icon behind the wheel. A boy who would one day become one of the most recognizable figures on the planet sitting quietly in the back seat. It's a reminder that even extraordinary lives pass through ordinary moments. André wasn't born into spectacle. It found him later. By the time André turned 18, the small world of rural France could no longer contain him. He moved to Paris, and this is where everything began to change. Paris was louder, faster, harsher, and full of opportunity. During this period, a local wrestling promoter noticed not because of his technique, not because of his charisma, but because of his size. The promoter immediately understood something important. André didn't need to be the best wrestler in the room. He only needed to exist. His presence alone was money. André began training in professional wrestling at night while working as a mover during the day to survive. His early wrestling name was inspired by French folklore, something mythic but rooted in tradition. It fit him perfectly. He was learning quickly, adapting his movements, understanding timing and performance. And André, whether he realized it or not, was becoming a story people couldn't look away from. In 1966, his life took another step forward when he met a Canadian wrestler and promoter who would later become his advisor and business manager. For the first time, André had someone helping him navigate the industry instead of simply being used by it. That same year, he made his television debut in France. The reaction was immediate. Viewers had never seen anything like him. The camera loved him. Crowds didn't know how to respond. Should they cheer, fear him, admire him? Often they did all three at once. Wins followed, titles followed, international bookings followed. André began wrestling not just in France, but across Europe and beyond. Germany, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Africa. Everywhere he went, the pattern repeated itself. The same question echoed in every arena. Who could possibly stop him? But beneath that growing legend was a man who was learning, very quickly, what it cost to live inside a body that didn't blend in. The road was long, the crowds were loud, and the attention never really shut off. Even then, before the world truly knew his name, André was already paying a price for becoming larger than life. As André's reputation grew, so did the distance between the man he was and the character audiences believed they knew. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, he wasn't just a wrestler traveling abroad. He was becoming a moving attraction. Every new country added another layer to the myth. Promoters didn't advertise matches so much as they advertised his presence. Come see the Giant. Come stand next to him. Come witness something you'll never forget. And for a while, that excitement felt intoxicating. Japan was a turning point. Wrestling there was treated with a seriousness André hadn't experienced before. The crowds were respectful, analytical, deeply invested. He wrestled under the name Monster Roussimoff, and the name fit the way promoters framed him, but it didn't fully match who he was. In Japan, doctors finally gave a name to what André had been living with his entire life: acromegaly, a hormonal disorder caused by excess growth hormone. It explained the constant growth, the strain on his joints, the pressure on his organs. It also came with an unspoken truth: his body was fighting against time. Not long after, André moved to Montreal, where his popularity exploded. Shows sold out regularly. Fans lined up just to see him walk to the ring. But success created a new problem, one unique to someone his size. Promoters began to run out of believable opponents. When a giant never loses, eventually the suspense disappears. Crowds still came, but the novelty started to wear thin. André felt it. He was becoming too big for the business that had built him. That's when everything changed. In 1973, Vincent J. McMahon stepped in as André's agent and reshaped his entire career. The strategy was simple but brilliant. André would not belong to one place. He would be everywhere, and nowhere for too long. He would feel rare, special. McMahon discouraged André from performing agile moves he was still capable of, not because André couldn't do them, but because giants weren't supposed to move that way. The less human he seemed in the ring, the more mythic he became. And with that shift came the name the world would never forget: André the Giant. The schedule became relentless. André was sent across territories, across countries, across continents. Promoters paid premium fees just to have him appear. He debuted in major American arenas, including Madison Square Garden, and every appearance felt like an event. Fans cheered him as a hero. Children stared in disbelief. Adults spoke about him in exaggerated whispers. He was no longer just a man wrestling matches. He was a living legend in motion. But legends still feel pain. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, André's body began to betray him. His joints ached constantly. His back pain was severe. Simple movements became exhausting. Still, he worked, night after night, city after city. He didn't want to let people down, and in an industry that rewarded toughness above all else, admitting pain felt like weakness. Storylines blurred with reality. When André was said to be injured on television, it often mirrored something real happening off camera. At one point, a dramatic ankle injury was written into a feud, but in truth, André had broken his ankle getting out of bed. Even recovery wasn't rest. He returned to the ring before he should have, driven by obligation more than readiness. Despite the pain, these years became the most unforgettable chapter of his career. Stadiums shook when he walked out. Feuds turned into history. Moments were created that fans would replay for the rest of their lives. Inside the ring, André wasn't presented as a man who could be beaten. He was treated like a natural force, something unstoppable. But away from the spotlight, the weight of that image began to wear him down. Fame made everyday life exhausting. Traveling was brutal. Airplanes weren't built for someone his size. Hotel rooms felt cramped, bathrooms humiliating, and long car rides left him in constant pain. Even simple tasks required planning, and true privacy almost never existed. Everywhere he went, people wanted something: photos, drinks, stories, access. Some wanted friendship, others just proximity to the legend. André could feel the difference, and it made him guarded. Rumors followed him too, especially about drinking. While some stories were exaggerated, others had truth. But what rarely made headlines was this: André knew his limits, and at one point, he stepped away, quietly, without applause. What also stayed mostly out of the spotlight was his personal life. He had close connections, intense crushes, and at least one long-term relationship that resulted in his only child. But he rarely spoke about it publicly. Fame had already taken so much from him. This was one part of his life he tried to protect. His daughter was born in 1979, and although circumstances kept them apart more than either of them wanted, André made sure she was supported. He believed she deserved stability, even if his own life lacked it. By the mid-1980s, André reached a rare crossroads. Wrestling was still calling, but acting offered something different. On a movie set, he wasn't expected to be invincible. He was allowed to be gentle, funny, human. When he joined the cast of The Princess Bride, something shifted. For once, people treated him as an equal, not a spectacle, not a monster, just a colleague. That experience stayed with him, but the outside world didn't soften. Fame still followed him into restaurants, hotels, and quiet moments. There was even an incident late in his career where frustration boiled over and led to a confrontation with a cameraman. It was out of character, but it was human. A reminder that even the gentlest person can break when pushed too far, too often. Those who truly knew André told a very different story than the one the public repeated. They described him as generous, shy, and deeply loyal. He paid for meals without hesitation. He protected people quietly. He used his strength for jokes, not cruelty. One friend described him simply as a nice, friendly giant. And that phrase, more than any statistic or headline, may be the truest summary of who he was. As the years went on, André began to retreat when he could. He spent time at his ranch, away from cameras and crowds. There, he was happiest doing ordinary things, caring for animals, sharing meals with friends, enjoying moments where no one asked him to be anything other than himself. It wasn't a dramatic escape. It was a quiet one. And for a man who had lived his life at full volume, that quiet meant everything. What made André's story so powerful wasn't just how big he was. It was how much he cared. Expectations, pain, love he couldn't always express the way he wanted to. And as time caught up with his body, behind the legend was a man who wanted connection more than applause. And that truth, more than any title, any match, any myth, is what makes his story impossible to forget. By the early 1990s, André's body had reached its limit, even if his legend hadn't. On January 28, 1993, André the Giant passed away in his sleep in a Paris hotel. He was only 46 years old. Officially, the cause was congestive heart failure, likely connected to his condition. He had been in France to attend his father's funeral and had stayed a little longer to be with his mother on her birthday. It's a detail that feels painfully human, even at the very end. André didn't want a grand goodbye. In his will, he asked to be cremated and for his ashes to be scattered at his ranch in North Carolina, the one place where he felt peace and anonymity. That's exactly what was done. No spectacle, no arena, just quiet ground. He also made one decision that speaks louder than any tribute. He left his entire estate to his daughter, Robin. He wanted her to be secure. Whatever he couldn't give her in time, he tried to give her in protection. After his death, the world rushed to honor the legend. He became the first and only inductee into the WWF Hall of Fame class of 1993. Documentaries, books, matches, and moments replayed his greatness again and again. To fans, he was eternal. To wrestling, he was irreplaceable. To pop culture, he was unforgettable, but the most emotional part of his legacy lives somewhere quieter. Robin later spoke about their complicated relationship. They didn't have the closeness either of them wanted, mostly because André was always on the road. Still, she made one thing clear: he never abandoned her. There was always a way to reach him. There was always support. And after he was gone, she began piecing together who her father really was by speaking to the people who knew him best. In doing so, she discovered the man behind the myth, the gentle, funny, lonely, generous giant who wanted normal things in an abnormal life. That's what makes André's story hit so hard. Millions knew his name, millions cheered him, but only a few truly knew him. And in the end, it wasn't the fame, the money, or even the legacy that defined him. It was the small moments, the kindness, the regret, the love he carried quietly. So now, let me ask you something. Which part of André's story made you see him as a real human being, not just a wrestling icon? And why did that moment stay with you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to read them. Share this video with someone who appreciates real stories behind legends. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like and subscribe for more powerful human stories from the hidden side of fame. We'll see you in the next one.